I'm Ukrainian from bilingual family. My father and mother, mother speaks Ukrainian, father speaks Russian, and they speak simultaneously. They don't switch the language. So I have Jewish and Polish roots, and I'm here. When invasion this year started, I was abroad. I had the chance not to come back, to build a career, international one, outside Ukraine. But I came back in the end of April, and because I want to help and to do anything.
So this dialogue is part of EFOR series to explain Ukraine to the Romanian public. So in what way Ukraine is not Russia? So this is our series, and we have now we are having this conversation with Dmytro Tuzhanskyi, who is a political scientist from Ukraine. And very quickly, Dmytro, everybody is asking themselves this question: how come that the Ukrainian society is so different from the one in Russia? And this is first and foremost about the pro-Western options, pro-Europe. So where does this come from? I mean, in Romania, we look to the East and we tended before this war to put everything in the same box and say, well, this is former Soviet Union. But why this big difference, in political options, which are existential in the year 2022?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds a very simple question, but it's very difficult. But I think there are a few angles to have an answer from it. So it's one question. It's a real history of Ukraine, modern history of 20th century, when the state and national building process happened. And what is the problem, I think, in terms of understanding of Ukraine, that we still, even inside Ukraine, we don't know the real Ukraine history. What actually happened in the beginning of the 20th century when Ukraine almost established this sovereign state, with the parliament, with the president, with elections. We don't know about famine and why it happened in 1932 and why 1933. Yes, and what is the difference between these 2 years? Because in 32 it was also the famine in Kazakhstan, but nothing just in Ukraine in 33, and it was the vendetta of the Soviet regime against Ukraine, let's say, intention to be independent, to have this private property, to live a different life, to be simple. And till the end of the Soviet Union. So the role of Ukraine, I don't know, people during Second World War, all these, let's say, anti-Soviet campaign inside Ukraine. So, and it was very well blocked by Soviet regime, definitely. That's why even in Ukraine, I was born in Soviet Union, but my parents, they are very typical representatives of this, let's say, Ukrainian Soviet society. And for them, this is very new history, totally different to what they knew about their own state, their own people. That's why, in this regard, what happened in 2014, 2004 with Orange Revolution, Revolution of Dignity, Russian invasion, Russian full-scale invasion this year, it's not a mistake. So Ukraine and Ukrainian people did not a mistake. It's a very straight logic, which you could follow through this real history we are studying right now. This battle for sovereignty and independence. Sorry that I sound a bit pathetic, but with the real facts, you will understand it's not a mistake. It's a very moment.
So your point is that it comes from, at least from the modern history. It's not something recent. It's not something very recent having to do just with the post-communist transition, but there was a Ukrainian society even within the Soviet Union. This is your point, right?
Of course, it's always a question of the, let's say, scope of the state or these frames. It's a question of the, let's say, core. Of course, even after the collapse of Soviet Union, we still have less and less, but this post-Soviet mentality. It exists, but it exists, for example, in Hungary. I hope so, and not I hope so, I hope not, but less and less. But I know that in Slovakia, in Romania as well. But this understanding yourself as a separate nation, as a people with people in unity with a different, let's say, ambition and vision, it is clear. Of course, it's a question of generation. It's a question of the, let's say, public opinion. And it's always, it's not a decisive, by the way, let's say, question and answer, but it's easy to track Ukrainians' attitudes towards EU, NATO, Ukraine language, and these three indicators for the last 30 years very clearly show you how this self-identification actually, growing and growing and covering all the Ukraine, especially among youth. I came across a few sociological surveys, even during Russian aggression since 2014, and some of them were conducted in Donbass, in occupied territories. We should be very careful in terms of data, but even one of the survey, which was conducted by Western sociological, campaign, I don't know whom they recruited, so it was independent, it was not Ukraine. And among youth in the occupied Donbass territory, they are for the Europe, that Ukraine should be the part of EU.
It's probably also a pragmatic option, because the youth want to be part of this world which they see on their mobile phones and not so much in a closed society.
And I'm happy with this. This is one of the problem, for example, in my conversation with my parents, I try to explain you that, of course, these, let's say, values, dreams, this, I don't know, Europe something mood, Netherlands mood or Amsterdam mood or Paris mood, it's something very it's difficult for you to accept and understand as a post-Soviet person. But in terms of very pragmatic social economic moments, so you have to support Europe, because it's a crazy gap between East and West. And in terms of to live life, to enjoy life, even from this regard, from this perspective, you have to support Europe. And it's clear.
We have this long thread coming from the modern history. And this is what surprised everyone, because you mentioned Hungary, you mentioned Romania or other countries, which were, even under the communist regime, they were independent from the Soviet Union. But the big surprise, I think, of the whole planet was to discover this year that there was a Ukraine buried somewhere in the belly of the Soviet Union, and it just came out to light. And this is again something very, very interesting. And there are episodes, under the Soviet Union, how Ukrainian patriotism, for example, during the Second World War, by the Soviet propaganda, was very much tied to the extreme right movements. And there was some connection, but not fully. And this is very difficult to explain today, I guess. So these are the obscure parts of the East European history, and we all have these parts in our the way the history was taught in our textbooks is by hiding some uncomfortable parts of our history. Second World War makes a lot of difference. How you interpret it today in different countries tells you a lot. So I would be curious, how do you see this in Ukraine today? Because it's a very painful. There are painful, episodes for everybody in the Second World War. How can you shed light for the Ukrainian public and for the rest of us in Eastern Europe in these Second World War entanglements?
Thank you for this, let's say, type of question, because in this regard, in terms of to be ill with right-wing fascism, Nazis intentions, it's a very typical for the Central Europe. Actually, from my point of view, Ukraine belongs to within Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland. This is these in between big players, and we are part of that. And for Ukraine and for Ukraine society, modern Ukrainian society, post-Soviet society, it's a huge test, how we pass it. I think we are dealing pretty good with this, despite all these, let's say, mystification and disinformation, and for somebody kind of unequal that all this revolution, it's a kind of tribute to this Nazi something. It's a it's a Russian, one of the Russian narrative, but it's good to check how many right-wing or far-right party we have in the parliament. No, since 2004 it was Svoboda, but to call them right-wing, okay, we could, but right now we have none. In 2019, when Zelensky was elected, we had president and the prime minister for 3 months at least. So, I mean, two main positions in the country was occupied by Jews. It was Groisman and Zelensky. They are originally Jews. So it's impossible, to have Jews as a head of the state.
But it's not impossible if you listen to Putin or to Lavrov. I mean, they have a theory for that.
Yeah, of course. In the way of, so with Putin and with his propaganda, everybody, so everything is possible, in Putin's version, Romania is going to attack Ukraine as soon as possible, Hungary as well, or, we should, I don't know what to do, kill each other, yeah? And it will be just a question of time.
He's offering territories to everyone who wants to pick them up.
Yeah, exactly. But this question of the personality of Bandera, Stepan Bandera, and his, let's say, I know definitely not so many people in the West know about these very difficult debates and even conflict inside this right-wing OUN organization during Second World War, because we have Banderici, who was leading by Bandera and his team, and Melnikivci, yeah? And, it's a very huge debate, both about ideology, about attitudes to the Jews as well, for example. Yeah, so no doubt that Ukraine nationalists, at least around Bandera, they were so anti-Semites, no doubt. So it's let's say, trauma problem we have to overcome. And due to the reality, what I, as a representative of the modern, let's say, generation of Ukraine, who was born actually in Soviet Union, but, with this revolution, I really see that Ukraine as a state and society are multicultural, inclusive, yeah, and very European. So I am Ukrainian from bilingual family. My father and mother, mother speaks Ukrainian, father speaks Russian, and they speak simultaneously. They don't switch the language. So I have Jewish and Polish roots, and I'm here. When invasion this year started, I was abroad. I had the chance not to come back, to build a career, international one, outside Ukraine. But I came back in the end of April, and because I want to help and to do anything. I'm 100% civilian. Yeah, I'm a pacifist, but I'm here to do what I can do. To support my army, society, parents, and to reach the victory. This is actually.
Can I pick up on this? Because my next question would be, what explains this tremendous resilience, force of self-organization, the bottom-up initiatives in Ukrainian society today? For us, for everybody who's looking from the outside, this is a surprise. And it's very much almost the opposite of what we see in Russia. So, and still, I mean, there's a common history there, the Soviet Union. So where does this come from? I mean, how can you explain? Because it's not just about some leaders who make decisions or parties. We see now a vibrant society, and you're part of it. So where does it come from?
Very good question. We're still looking the right answer for this. And the decision I explained you, my personal decision, it's not unique.
It's a good illustration. It's a good illustration.
So I'm not unique in this regard. So I'm very, very typical Ukrainian right now, a part of the crowd, let's say. But this crowd, this is, for example, Fukuyama or Huntington, they explained very good in their this monography, of Clash of Civilization and the end of the history. They explain this process of indigenization of the nation. But when you read in a book, it sounds like, okay, very theoretical. But what is very, not crazy, but impressive, amazing, that this, let's say, miracle described by these intellectuals, many intellectuals, it's happening right now. I see this every day, how people self-organize. So it's a question of national building, understanding of the common thread, common values, common will, and of course, it's a question to survive. So everybody finally, the percent of the people who understood that Russia doesn't want to be Ukraine exist, to Ukraine and Ukrainians. So for Russians, we are mistakes, all of us, despite what language you speak, what religion you are, or where you live in Ukraine. We all are mistakes because we don't want to be Russians.
Is this an opinion shared just by the Russian political elite, by Kremlin, or is it broader in society? So, because the Russian society better than we do, is this something shared by ordinary people? Because that would be really concerning.
I'm afraid that yes. I was to Russia in 2016. It was international mission. I was to Siberia, and it was a joke that if Ukraine is a part of the mission, it should be sent to Siberia. I don't know if you get this because it was that
Nice
during
joke.
Soviet period of time, that who identified himself as not loyal to the Soviet regime, it was sent to Siberia, out of, So, and I saw that even in 2016. What was the problem and is the problem? Even before this invasion of the February 24th, I was that person who didn't believe that Russia will do this, that Russia could do this. Of course, and it's, it's 100% that we understand Russia as a threat. But this is a question of, what they are doing. And it's important to come to Ukraine. And thank you, Sorin. So you was to Odessa, at least, or any other parts. And it's a backbone of Ukraine, I wasn't to the front line, but what my fellows, friends, some of them already are killed, So Russia is doing real fascism. And this is the responsibility of the whole society. Of course, it's kind of simplification, but this is like Germany before Nazis or during Nazis,
And
so
that's the perfect moment to ask you the last question. Can we do something about Russia? Do you see a chance to change this? Maybe not like in Ukraine exactly, but a little bit more towards democracy at the basis of the Russian society. Not necessarily. I'm not talking about Kremlin or the rotation of elites or power change, but in society. Can it also change in Russia?
Of course. So everybody is doing already supporting Ukraine. Russia has to lose, and it will be the main and starting point for their, let's say, retreat, or for their cure, because this society is very ill, and it's very fascist society, very.
But will ordinary people get the message? I mean, if they lose the war, but they are still in the bubble of propaganda, are they going to get the message what they lost, or they are going to be like revanchist supporters of theories like some elites in Germany after the First World War? Because you can very easily imagine what kind of stories they can invent about stabbing in the back or the West doing this or that to us. I mean, are they going to get the message why we lost and internalize it, or they're going to become even more paranoid?
After that, it will be a responsibility of Russian elites. If they will start to exaggerate or explode this defeat as in a way of revanchism, so it will be more, crazy even Russia, more fascist Russia. It could be, but there is no alternative to defeat Russia, to stop this, because one more time to negotiate with such a Russia, with Putin's Russia, it means to prolong this war. And sorry for this bad news, but of course, after defeat, we will see, is it possible for new war or not? This is the reality we're in. As soon as we face this reality, as soon we will find the solution for it. But right now, the main solution is middle term or short term solution to support Ukraine to win, make Russia lose. And then let's understand.
Okay, thank you very much, Dmytro. It was a very good, very informative discussion, at least for me. Thank you for making time and for catching the internet signal there in the nice industrial space where you have shared offices or whatever you have. Thank you very much, and hear from you again.
Likewise, thank you very much.